Welcome to another episode of Surgeons' Lives. I'm your host, John Monson. Today's guest is Liane Feldman, who is the chair of surgery in McGill in Montreal. She's just finished her year as president of SAGES and is well known for her academic work and her clinical pathway work in the field of enhanced recovery in surgery, and is something of an expert in procedures like hernia repair. She's a native Montrealer, and apart from 4 years in college in Brown in Rhode Island, has spent her entire professional career in and around Montreal, where she lives with her husband and no longer with her 3 kids, who are all grown and flown. She tells us a story of her career development from the very earliest stages, obviously, going on faculty, early mentorship with Jerry Freed, who was the chair and indeed whose job she subsequently took. She talks to us also about work-life balance and how she now has different priorities, of course, as a chair than she did as simply a practicing surgeon at the beginning of her career, and then a division chief for 8 or 9 years. She, of course, has received many awards and acknowledgements over the years, and as I say, last year was a highly successful president of SAGES and hosted an extraordinary annual meeting. So without further ado, let's join a little late in the conversation due to a few technical glitches, but nonetheless, the conversation with Liane Feldman. I'm John Monson, and this is Surgeons' Lives. I went back on again.
All right. So, I think that really, I was never cavalier about, and it's just the way I'm wired about, that I think the stakes are very high in surgery, and also the mental connection, the connection we have with our patients, which is, really physical and tactile. And then when something goes wrong, that was really my motivation, was just to learn to be a good surgeon. And that was it. And I wasn't even really motivated towards research. I didn't have a great research career in my residency. I wasn't like it's another story, but basically in terms of lab research, I knew right away that wasn't where my future was going to be. My mentor in the lab, Laurie Rosenberg, who went on, is now like a CEO, a hospital CEO, so went, but he was a transplant surgeon and a basic science researcher. Actually, I'm sure recognized early on that this was not going to be for me, but what he did me a big favor, which was that he turned me on to like outcomes research, which is what I did end up doing. And this was again like mid 1990s when we were first starting to see the VA, like what became NISQIP, develop. And those kinds of papers were coming out. And then I really, that was what the research that I started to do even in that year under his supervision, and then went on to do more formal training and sort of research methods and that sort of thing. So I really liked it because it was more connected with what I was doing in a day-to-day. And I guess I don't have such a great imagination.
It's interesting, almost, I know numerous people that did islet cell transplant work, and they almost always use the phrase that you did, which is, I spent 1 year or 2 years doing islet cell transplant, and then they always followed up by, that really didn't work very well.
There's still people working on it, for sure, but
it's exactly
the first time I sneezed into my cell culture, I kind of realized this isn't
exactly. I remember I spent 2 years doing basic lab research in tumor immunology, and we were growing cells and one thing or another, and used to come in at the weekend and feed them and all that sort of stuff. And I remember coming into the lab on a Saturday morning, and my co-fellow was sitting there literally staring in silence which wasn't his normal, thing. And I walked in, and he literally didn't move a muscle. And eventually I said to him, "What's up, Sean?" And he went, "You can't believe it." And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I've just knocked over the last month's worth of cell cultures."
Yeah. That's the thing. I'm like, but I could sit and look at data and spreadsheets and play around with it
Yeah.
for hours and hours and hours. And I was just not, I just knew this wasn't for me. And my daughter's doing like research in like she's doing a graduate degree in microbiology. And she had a, mouse experiment, same, she worked for 3 months on it. And then, something happened along the way, and it's, 3 months of work. That's just,
bad. Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
So I wrote down on my crib sheet a phrase which I realized was a tricky phrase, so I even put it in question, quotes, etc. But as you started your career and progressed your career, you've gone through the female experience of a surgeon, which when you started your career is different to now.
Yeah.
How would you summarize that for you? Was it the world's most dreadful experience, or was it hardly noticeable, or somewhere in between?
I would say more like hard for me, and maybe it's just I this is just my own experience, so I certainly wouldn't generalize it. For me, I can count on sort of one hand, stories of times where I felt that my gender really had, played a role. I mean, I had a baby as a chief resident. I had a baby as a fellow, and I had the third baby as like a junior staff. And I had, really great, very good support. And it's also that I don't want to make my American friends jealous, but and you're, not from there, not saying, but like parental leave, we had maternity leave, and so I had, now people can, anyway, I took off almost 6 months with each, with each baby. And, and I had it, it was chaos, total chaos for many years, complete chaos. But I never felt, I would say it was not really a big day-to-day issue in sort of when I live my day-to-day. And I think that's just, I'm speaking from a position of, I would say privilege in terms of having both sets of parents in town, which is another reason why we stay here. My husband has a good job, so we could afford very good childcare, really good childcare in our house. I had, healthy pregnancies. I'm healthy. My kids were healthy. So, that, and at work, and I had good role models ahead of me too. There were women surgeons who ahead of me, and also, I saw pregnant, I saw with young families, and I also think I was in that time when there was a turnover of some surgeons that might have been more coming from a very traditional kind of experience. So maybe it was also being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you were in a place that was culturally well adjusted, number one. Number two, you had a great support network, family, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, what's also, and it always interests me coming from the other side of the Atlantic, that in the US they still refer to maternity leave as disability, which is, and it's anything more than a week is considered problematic. I mean, it's not right, of course, but you've just finished your presidential tenure. President of SAGES, obviously a large society, and almost every society president, regardless of the society, has to devote a significant amount of time on issues such as diversity and inclusion, and gender equality and one thing or another. You had, an excellent experience, with a lot of support, but it isn't the same for lots of people. I mean, I'd go so far as to say your experience was perhaps exceptional, good, but exceptional. But
Right.
that isn't the case. And where do you think society in general is going like that?
Well, I think one of the things I recognized, and I mean, when I took on this role, which is like a bit more visible in terms of like you're the chair and I'm the chief at a big hospital. And even when I was appointed in 3 years ago, like the hospital put out like a press release, first woman, chair surgery type of thing.
I read it.
Right. And then like I was like interviewed on the news, and I was like, this is like a man bites dog type of story, right? Like, but that's weird in a way. And this question came up, and I don't want to minimize it for the reasons that you said. So I don't think I really appreciated, probably didn't reflect enough on, and then I got it more, but then I felt it was important to celebrate those kind of the first something, because I think it is a message to society that helps for people to see themselves. And the more we're able to attract the best, most creative, energetic, exciting people to our field, the better it is for everybody. So we want to make sure that we see, I mean, I see diversity in terms of, and in a broadly defined sense. So, economic, rural, urban, obviously gender, race, ethnicity, experiences, etc. I mean, and all of those people bring their own life experiences and their own connection with patients that's different. And especially, I think in the pandemic, it became clear, and everybody knew this, I guess, but it was just, just the disparities that we face in outcomes. And you see it in general surgery, we're there, you're doing emergency cases, you see who you're operating on, you see who are the patients, and I think that the more we reflect back what those patients' experiences to those patients, and I think there's some data about this, that the better the outcomes will be. So even, I think it's just basic, just a basic tenet that I kind of didn't really think about much before, but I think we're all forced to look at our blind spots a bit more in the past.
It's kind of, one of my, I think actually the next one I'm due to release on this podcast is with Julie Freischlag.
Yeah.
And I cut a clip out of the interview. By the time this one comes out, it'll be past. So I'm not breaking any secrets here, but I cut a clip out of it, which was just a fantastic 40 seconds where she describes doing her boards in LA, and she said she did the exam. I did the oral exam, and she said she thinks it was an Asian guy. Maybe I think she thought he was from Vietnam or somewhere like that, who was interviewing her, and said, "By the way, at the end of it, he said, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?"
Oops.
Yeah. To which he said, "How do you do your housework with all of this?" So she didn't quite know how to answer this, and to be fair to her, she said, she genuinely thinks the guy was just curious, but she said, "Oh, I don't know really either, etc." But the best bit of it was, she said she walked out, as she was walking out, and she did say right to the board later, but as she was walking out, the person coming in after her was a heavily pregnant female. And she said, as she walked out, she said, "You're going to have a problem explaining that."
Yeah. And they're probably the only two graduate women vascular surgeons that year, right? No, and I had a story a little bit like that, where I think people just sometimes, like we all say, dumb things
Yeah.
sometimes. And then the minute they're out our mouth, we're like, woo. I mean, and I think we need to own it when I mean, and I think our residents and our children kind of hold us more accountable nowadays. They'll say like, no, you can't say that. So that's, but I definitely, when I was interviewing for, residency, it was different than now. We all kind of, it was a lot more on a handshake and so forth. And I missed the day I went to interview, at a prominent program, and I was waiting outside, they had the chairs lined up in the hallway outside if it was the chair or the chief, and, somebody important from my perspective who was going to interview me. And I was waiting there. And the person walked by, this very important person, and saw me in my little suit sitting there and said to me, oh, are you the wife of one of the people interviewing here today?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like,
Yeah.
no, but I'm not coming here now. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was just, I'm sure, and somebody, was like, oh, it's mortifying, but sometimes
Well, it's interesting you say that. I interviewed.
And sometimes it just comes out.
Yeah, that's right. I interviewed Justin Dimick. I haven't released it yet, but he said when he was when he was in Hopkins, he realized he wanted to do surgery, but he didn't want to do it there because he didn't like the culture of surgery there. But he knew he wanted to do surgery. And that's, I mean, Justin is not ancient, but it's not yesterday. I mean, it's a little while ago, and all of that sort of stuff. So maybe you didn't have focused ambitions other than being the best surgeon you could be at the beginning, but now you're kind of intellectually obliged to have ambitions. I think when you're applying for or being interviewed for the chair's job, you're meant to have a vision,
Yes.
So what is your vision for McGill?
Yeah, I mean, I think along the way, kind of things change, and after when I was about 8 years into this, I was kind of asked to really think about doing the general surgery division chief.
Yeah.
And again, I really didn't want to do it at the time. I was really busy. I had my research stuff. I had young kids, and I really wasn't sure that kind of thing was for me. I'm not interested in titles. I'm really, really not interested in titles. So like it wasn't my ambition to have that title. But then that kind of experience, I actually liked it. It was actually a good for me. It fits well with my kind of need to organize and be very compulsive and controlling nature. So that was good. And at the time I thought the main thing in general surgery was how to find connection between people who are now doing very different things. What is the thing that makes us still a general surgeon? The way our division was organized was that went anywhere from melanoma, breast surgery, all the way to liver transplant and trauma, and everything in between. Of course, colorectal, bariatrics, endocrine. But what are the glue that keep us together? And those were things I think that in general, our connections are through our training programs, so our connections through the residencies. So making sure that we all, had ways to engage in that. And I think that there are research threads and quality improvement and outcomes research and pivoting to how we use data in a more transparent way and to make decisions as a culture that were things that helped, keep the division together. When it came time to think about this position, because here we have term limits.
Yeah.
So I knew that that there was going to be, an opportunity. I spent probably 2 years thinking very, very seriously about it. And it wasn't obvious to me that I should put my hat in the ring. I think one of my main motivators was really is sort of service and duty. Like, and I don't mean service and duty as like to some institution. I mean service and duty to my colleagues and to my mentors and to our patients, who did the same for me, right?
Yeah.
did the same for us. And, you know, so going into what do I pitch as vision? I mean, you know, we have specific issues here with, you know, wait lists and access. And then of course,
Yeah.
3 months later, we had COVID that threw everything off.
Yeah.
But the same kinds of ideas, like finding the thread that connects us as surgeons. The main role, I think, of a department, because it even amplifies the issues from general surgery to orthopedics and, you know, urology and cardiac surgery. Well, what connects us as surgeons, or what's the role of a department chair, is I really think a lot is on career development. Like, what's the value add that the department adds to somebody's life when their day-to-day is really with their clinical colleagues? So what can you add to that to bring value to people's lives? So I think there is a lot of mentorship, career development, culture, making sure that people feel that that there's a steady hand on the ship. You know, there's a lot of change all the time, and
they don't work for you. I mean,
no.
when I was a chair for 15 years, I used to, you know, point out to people, you know, they don't work for you, work for them.
Yes.
And your job is to be their advocate, to be, and it's parenting as much as well. It's you know, advocate, but you know, hold them accountable, your faculty, but also provide support and nurturing and mentorship, etc. And so that they can do their job and be the best that they can be.
Correct.
So are you optimistic for the future for young surgeons today, or do you think, oh my God, it's not the profession I went into?
I'm optimistic, but I'm wired that way, and I don't think I don't think I'm not trying to. I'm not a Pollyanna. Like, I'm really not. But I'm not a negative person, and I don't think you can be pessimistic and devote the time it takes to be, you know, a chair and a chief, because I think it's not, I know that, I think I still believe that with work and engagement, we chip away at things and we improve them. I think a lot of that for me came through working on, you know, clinical pathways and, you know, ERAS pathways, and seeing that even I'm working in huge bureaucracies. You know, McGill is a huge bureaucracy, and this hospital is enormous and a huge bureaucracy. And I think it's very easy to be discouraged very quickly, but then we still have the influence in our own spheres. And in terms of how we're perceived, surgeons are perceived as leaders. We are the leaders in our domains, whether that's your clinic, whether that's your OR that day, whether that's the emergency room that minute, whether that's the simulation center with medical students. You are like, no matter how we feel in ourselves, that's how we're perceived, as the people that lead the team, as the people who know we do magic, right? We're the people that people call when they're done. And especially as a general surgeon, that when it doesn't fit in neatly and you can't really be the one to say no. And that's hard a lot of the time, and it's annoying a lot of the time. No, but I really do believe that. I'm very optimistic. I think it's a wonderful career. It's a craft, so that we always working on it. It's never boring. And if ever I'm sort of really burnt out, I just go to the clinic and I see some patients and I do a few cases, and like, I remember, I still, John, and you may be like this too, because you're kind of, I think you're an optimistic person as well. Like, there are times, and I do less call now, but I still do some, when if I come into the middle of the night and I'm not doing anything fancy, like basic stuff, doing a really hard gallbladder, or I'm doing a bowel obstruction or something, or a perforated ulcer, which happens to be my favorite case, because like the patient is in so much pain, and you know, and even the natural history of that is like death, right? And you come in and with fairly simple skills and tools, you solve their problem and they're fine. I drive home at 3 a.m. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I know how to do that. Like, I can't believe I didn't know how to do it for a long time, and now, like, I know how to do it. I mean, it's amazing.
I remember sitting as a very junior resident watching Bjorn Borg play John McEnroe in Wimbledon on a Saturday in the hospital, stuck, and I was saying to the guy beside me in the doctor's mess, saying, look at those kids, you know, they're just all that money they have and all the adulation and all the fans just for playing tennis. And the guy beside me said, yeah, but they don't know how to put an IV up.
That's right. Exactly. I said that in the clinic today because I do some adrenal stuff.
Mm.
But I was seeing a patient in the general surgery clinic, and the patient has like hyperaldosterone, like an adenoma and hyperaldosteronism. But we needed to do venous sampling, and they need to have all their antihypertensives
Yeah.
changed. So I said, we're going to bring them to our multidisciplinary clinic instead of general surgery clinic, because I work with the endocrinologist, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I cannot manage their antihypertensives and their potassium if I have to take them off. And then one of the residents was like, you could, but you don't want to. I'm like, no, I cannot do that as well as they can do it, but I can take out their adrenals, both sides, and they can't. So we're bringing something to the table,
That's the purpose.
Yeah.
So when you shut the door in the office and you go home, assuming that you do shut the door in the office and go home, what makes you tick? What do you like doing? I mean, which is really the stuff that matters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, family is the most important. And my kids they're grown up, and actually we're empty nesters for the first time this past
Wow.
year.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the thing that we love to do is we have a cottage, like a lake house. It's really beautiful spot, really quiet, no motorboats. So a lot of being in nature, being on the water. We love to, and it's winter here quite a bit. So
Yeah.
sports, skiing. Now my husband and I are kind of into biking, road biking.
Oh,
So being really active. I
yeah.
love to travel, learn new things. I love to cook. We did a lot of cooking as a family, and I'm really proud of my kids for their academic achievements, blah, blah, blah. But I'm really proud of them because they all three are really good cooks. And
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah, so we all cook together when we get together, and those were some of the things that really we love to do as a family. And I think it's really critical, especially as a young family, to have that time. For me, it was important. We had this cottage that I physically took myself away from the hospital and from the office, like you're saying, shut the door. It was difficult for me to do that in my house in the city, but it was a lot easier to do it physically, removing myself to another location. And that was a big thing for us as a family.
Are you a competitive person?
Yeah, for sure. Very.
You like to win?
Yeah, some might accuse me of being a competitive person. Yeah, are you a competitive person, John?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's I spent years playing with old cars and racing them, and I remember it's just like the endocrinologist. I was bemoaning to a professional driver that I don't know how he does what he does. I don't know how he goes that fast. I can't do that. And I remember him saying to me, you're a better racing driver than I am a surgeon.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to say. Yeah, for sure.
So I said, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah,
It's good
sure.
enough for me. Um, as you say, Canadian system, you've term limits, number one, and number two, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have mandatory retirement at 65?
We don't.
Don't? No. Okay, well, that's easy because then I get to ask you the question that I've asked some people. It's a good while away yet, but I've interviewed a couple of people who plan to work until they're 80 at least. And I use him as the poster child, Robbie Madoff, who walked away. And, having spent his entire career basically in Minnesota, moved back to Brooklyn to be with his kids and is the happiest person you could ever imagine. Where do you sit in that? Specifically, do you think people should be allowed be the chair until they're 78?
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing about policies. Like it takes the allowed, like it takes your own, it takes you out of the equation. It's sort of just,
Yeah.
because I personally, I'm 55, so I hope to be able to do, my 2 terms in this job, just because I think if I'm able to,
Yeah.
if reappointed, because I think it just takes some time to implement things. It takes a lot of time, but
But you might be the best chair that ever. And everybody says, my God, she's really good. We got to change the policy. We can't let her step down. We need her,
no,
just like, FDR,
sure.
did 4 terms as
Yeah,
president or 3 and a bit, etc.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't plan to do that. I plan to, when I'm, I think my plan right now would be to finish my my terms, and at that point I'll be in my early 60s, and I think people should have, I think turnover is really good, and
Yeah.
people bring new energy to it, and yeah, no, it won't be, now I've recorded it, but no, I
Yeah.
think it's a very good thing
At least I
have.
hope you have.
Yeah, right. So yeah, no, I think and my husband, he's 5 or 6 years older than I am, and we started to talk about it. I don't think he intends to work forever either, and
Where will I
um
find you 10 years from now?
at my cottage,
At
yeah,
your cottage. Yeah.
which we're renovating right now for that. We're manifesting what we want to see happen in 10 years from now. So we're making it bigger, and because our kids are away, and it'll be hopefully a gathering place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's good to have somewhere. My wife and I talk about, we don't need a house that big. And, I know that sure, that's right for, 98% of the year or whatever, but I want to have somewhere where the kids can come back,
exactly.
and be, and, that's what you got to do. So
Mhm.
how would you like to be remembered, and how do you think you will be remembered?
Well, I guess I would like to be remembered as a good mentor. I mean, as somebody that helped develop people, or contributed to them being their best, as you put it. I mean, I think that's the main role in what I do now, for all levels. Um, that would be, I think that's the main thing. So if somebody, if I had the impact in somebody's life the way Jerry had the impact in my life, then I think that would be success. That is success.
Yeah. And do you think you will be remembered as that, or will you be remembered for, isn't she the one who was president of Sages, or what?
Right. I don't think we're really remembered for our titles so much as how we make, you know, how we make people feel. I forget who said that. My somebody important. But yeah, I think it's those feelings, and just in the way we've talked now, the stories that we have are we remember the things that made us feel either really bad or really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're remembered by. And of course, I hope that, patients that you've had an impact in their lives remember you. I think those are, I think those are, because we are so privileged to have that ability to change people's lives. And I think we can have the ability to be really negative in people's lives as well.
No.
Not, so I think with us a choice that, kind of have to wake up every day and decide. And I certainly don't succeed at that, but I think that's a choice that we make. And like, I'm very conscious of it now in the role that I'm in, because of one of the other things you said about, I don't know how you put it, but like discipline or remediation or whatever, and people, behave when people misbehave. I'm very conscious of, in my role now, you have to be the person that
Yeah.
doesn't have such a bad day all the time. And I was thinking, even just walking into the operating room and just choosing to say, okay, today I'm going to make everyone who leaves this operating room today is going to feel that they had a good day and did something good today. And I think that's not that easy sometimes in the operating room, but I think that's like, I was thinking of maybe putting like some kind of sign on the door saying like, choose happiness today, or choose to be, like, we're in the situation now, John, where we now have these private, you had them in the States, but in where we are, because of the pandemic, there's like now, private medical clinics that are surgical centers.
Yeah.
And they're still like covered by our
Yeah.
payment system. but we've lost staff to these places
Yeah.
because just of the work environment,
Yeah.
So we need to compete with that. But I think it's not just a practical matter. It's saying something about how we make people feel every day. And I think we all, this is a work in progress, believe me, anyone will tell you that. But I think that that's something I've become a lot more conscious of, in the last few years.
Any it's kind of a double-sided question, but any regrets and anything on your bucket list?
Regrets. I'm not a person who kind of I just don't think I'm one to dwell on regrets. I think if I had to go back, I would probably, in terms of like, there are some skills that in research that I think I would have benefited from. But I wouldn't say they're regrets, but
Sure.
Um,
And the good news is the world doesn't care.
The world doesn't care. That's right. So I did that once. I said to somebody who I was working with as a collaborator in research, and I said, "Do you think I should go and do this or that?" She's like, "Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I can do that for you, and you do the part that you do, and then we're all good." And it's right. So that's exactly. So this is why what you regret in your head doesn't necessarily, just doesn't really mean very much. And bucket list, I think, one of the things I'm very aware of is just how quickly things change in a second, and your life is completely changed. So I have to say, I don't really have a bucket list. I mean, if there's things that I need, I feel like I try to do the things that I want to do. And I don't think we should put things off. And that I learned from having kids.
Yeah.
If the first kid came along in maybe not the most organized fashion, it wasn't like we said, okay, March 26th, 2000, whatever is when we're going to start to have kids. And because of that, it caused its own need to reevaluate what my plans were in terms of my training and so forth. But if I had put that off, I possibly would have had regrets, and maybe I wouldn't have had 3 kids, or maybe. So I think one should not put too many things off.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I ask people how they'd like to be remembered, this is not a scientific analysis, but my sense is that the younger people I've interviewed, still have a sort of a technical type answer to it. I'd like to be remembered as a very good teacher, or a very good this, that, and the other, etc. Whereas the older people, there's a consistency of people that when you press them, they say, "I'd just like to be remembered as a good person."
Right.
I asked George Fielding, George Fielding, the bariatric, who's a longstanding friend of mine and who's been through amazing health scares and a crazy life of, making millions and, having 2 families and one thing or another. And I said, "How would you like to be remembered?" And he said, "Well, a good guy, good husband, good father, good surgeon." And I said, "You could only have one, George." And he said, "A good guy."
Yeah. I think health scares do that. They focus you. And I had a health scare early on, and that really focused what I wanted to make sure that I had, and family was just the number one, and having kids and having relationships and having friends, and those are the ingredients, I think, of happiness.
Well, listen, Liane, thank you so much for spending time. Only time will tell as to how much of the beginning of the conversation was or was not recorded in patchiness, but with the magic of editing, I'm sure we'll be able to make your early life sound really interesting. Number one.
So interesting, thank God. Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. It'll come out. It comes out on YouTube on the channel Surgeons Lives. You should. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see any of them, but it's people like Jeff Matthews and Sonia Ramamurthy and George Fielding and And your good buddy Pascal Fuchschuber
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
is the most recent one. And it'll be out on a podcast for those who have nothing better to do while in the gym.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Thank you. That's great, John. I was very honored that you wanted to talk to me. And if the beginning didn't work and you want to do it over, then that's no problem.
Well, thank you so much. All right,
Okay,
you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
done. Bye.
Bye.